In this video, I want to talk about 7 ways you can protect yourself from IRS scammers. It's tax season, and many people are pretending to be the IRS, looking to steal your personal information, or even worse, your hard-earned money. Welcome back. This is episode 197. As many of you have hopefully filed your taxes, or at least filed for an extension as the April 15th deadline has passed, I thought it would be good that in this week's episode we focus on how you can protect your data and your personal information from IRS scammers and criminals looking to steal that information. But before we get into that, as a reminder, if you are serious about getting a plan in place for your retirement, then consider signing up for my online retirement planning course, Retirement Readiness Review. It's an on-demand video course where I educate you on much of what you need to know about planning the ideal retirement. I cover taxes, Social Security, Medicare, investing, estate planning, and much more. There's over 7 hours of material, as well as many helpful checklists to implement what you learn. To sign up for the course and learn more, head over to retirewithryan.com and click on courses. So as we talked about taxes last week, it's definitely a time of year many people dread. A lot of us, put off filing our taxes, and we're also very fearful of the IRS ever showing up at our home or our business for an audit. An old coworker of mine used to say, "We're from the IRS and we're here to help." That was one of his favorite jokes to tell. And obviously, there's a lot of great people at the IRS that want to help you, but criminals know the fear that we have about the IRS wanting more information for us or wanting to show up for an audit, and they look to take advantage of people's fears of this to use their different scams. However, there are a number of things that you can do, some very simple things that I'm going to go over in this episode that will help you to not fall victim to these scams and protect your information. So one of the first things you should know about the IRS is that they don't make outgoing phone calls. They don't leave you voicemails. They don't send you texts. They don't go on social media and tell you that they're going to show up and arrest you if you don't pay your information. And they generally don't use email as well. And one of the first things they do if you have a problem or they have a problem with something that you've sent into them is they send you a letter. So if you ever receive a phone call with someone who says they're from the IRS and they want some information from you, you should probably just hang up the phone right away and save your time. If you like to play around with scammers, then maybe you play around a little bit and see where it goes. You can also block the phone number if it's a repeated number that you keep getting a call from. One of the beauties of smartphones is that it's pretty easy to block a number. If you have an iPhone, if you just go to your recent contacts, then there's a little I to the right of that number, a little blue I. If you click that, you can scroll down a little bit and click block this caller, and then you won't hear from that person ever again. So the IRS is never going to call asking for your personal information, Social Security number, date of birth, bank account information. So make sure if you're still talking to them, you haven't hung up yet, you don't give them that information. They're not going to revoke your driver's license, your business license. If you're someone who's here as an immigrant, they're not going to revoke your immigration status. And they're certainly not going to call law enforcement to come arrest you. These are all threats that these scammers will make, so don't fall victim to these threats. And if you do receive one of these letters from the IRS, don't panic. Many times it's a simple fix that your CPA or financial advisor can help you with. When I've had clients get these letters in the past, it's often something as simple as they forgot to give one of their 1099s to their accountant, or they forgot to report it, and the IRS has realized that there's a mismatch with the dividend income they received or income they received, so they need to file some paperwork to correct that. So don't panic. So tip number 2 is be suspicious from emails looking like they are from the IRS. Anytime you get email from someone, if it doesn't look familiar, or even if it looks like it's from a familiar person, you should always hover over the address of the email to see who it's from. Now, I often receive emails from family and friends, and it says in my inbox from so-and-so family member, but when I hover over the email from address, I see it's not from them. So I just report it as spam or delete it. And you often find mistakes in the emails themselves when you're getting emails from scammers. You can see misspellings and things like that. So there's other ways that can tip you off. And then this is very important. Make sure you do not ever, ever, ever click on any links in an email before you know it's from someone or a business that you trust. Because if you click on one of these links, you're now potentially allowing the scammer into your computer, into your phone, to install some spyware, or even worse, they could hijack your files and use something that's called ransomware. That's where they lock your files and they demand a ransom for you to get your files back. I am embarrassed to say that about 10 years ago, I clicked on an email that looked like it was a real email, and I clicked on ransomware on my personal computer, and it locked all of my files. At the time, it demanded 3 Bitcoin, which today would be over $200,000, but back then it was about $2,000. But I didn't pay that. Luckily, I was backing up my computer every week, and I was able to get my data back. Unfortunately, I lost about a week's worth of work. So just be careful that you don't let that happen to you. Tip number 3 is avoid sending checks through the mail. And this is important because it used to be that if you went to your post office and you put your mail in the postal box, you never had to worry about that getting taken. But now there's a lot of reports of different scammers out there who fish boxes. They use different things to stick into the boxes and put something in there, something sticky that pulls out envelopes. It's also been reported that the postal keys themselves that open these boxes, there are many of them out there, and a lot of them in the hands of criminals. So criminals have the ability to open these boxes. So if you do have to send checks, important mail, it's probably a good idea to go into the post office and give it to them rather than putting it into one of these drop boxes. It's sad to say. And if you are sending checks, it's always a good idea to track your checks so that if you believe your check was received but it wasn't deposited and it's been a number of times, you might want to cancel that check. Maybe it's been taken by a fraudster. And it's also a good idea too when you're filling out your checks to use black permanent ink and try not to leave any spaces in there where anybody could write some other information in that check, changing the amount or changing who it's to, be able to, to steal your money, from your checking account. Tip number 4 is at all times you want to protect your personally identifiable information, your PII. What does that mean? Well, PII, as I said earlier, is your social security number, your date of birth, your driver's license, your bank account. You want to protect that information. And one way you can do that is by not emailing anything that contains your PII. Even though you might be sending it to somebody who you know their email address and you trust them, what happens if either your email address or their email, or I should say their email account or your email account gets hacked? And now that hacker has access to everything that's in that email account. And if they find your files that are attached with your PII, they could then use that information to open up accounts in your name, steal money from your bank accounts, etc. So most firms, accounting firms, financial firms have secure upload of places where you can securely send information to them, such as through like Box or ShareFile. We personally use Box at my firm. Anytime clients are sending us information, we ask them to send it through Box. That way a hacker can't gain access to it. So make sure that you do that. Tip number 5, try to pay as many of your bills electronically. As we talked earlier, there can be a lot of fraud with sending checks through the mail. So if you pay your bills electronically, it's going to cut down on the amount of fraud that could take place. It's also going to have your bill paid faster, and you're going to know that it was paid, whereas checks can get lost. There's been increased delays over the years with the Postal Service, so it's not as reliable as it has been before. Tip number 6, request direct deposits. Wherever you can, if you're receiving payments, it's a good idea to request direct deposit. And this, again, cuts down on the ability for someone to steal a check out of your mailbox while it's sitting there and you haven't yet picked it up. It's also faster. And as part of this, I've personally signed up for United States Postal Service Informed Delivery. And what that is, it's a free service where every day you get an email in the morning that lets you know the mail that's coming your way. The USPS actually scans your envelopes and you see scans of the mail that's coming to you. So that way you know what's coming to you. It's a little nicer because you know what to expect, but also if you see something on there, if you were supposed to receive a check but you get home, by the time you get to your mailbox it's gone, there's high probability that somebody stole that. So this just gives you some added protection in knowing that if you were getting something, you didn't get it, where it stood. And the last tip I'll leave you with is try to set up what's known as two-factor authentication with as many of your financial accounts as possible. Now, chances are you're familiar with two-factor authentication. What that is it requires you to log in and provide two pieces of information every time you're logging in. So let's just say it was your bank account. You log into your bank account, and every time you log in, you'd also need to provide a PIN number in addition to your username and password for your bank account. So by having this two-factor, even if a scammer was able to steal your username and password, they probably wouldn't be able to breach the two-factor authentication. Sometimes that could be an email where you get a PIN emailed to you, but it might be better to have it be a text message to your cell phone or what's known as a authenticator app. So there's different apps that you can download for your phone that provide a PIN number that resets every 30 seconds or so. So that way, if it's a text to you or an authenticator app PIN, it's very unlikely that the scammer would have also stolen your cell phone, and that is possible. But that way, you're going to prevent them from following all the way through with logging in. So wherever you can, you want to try to enable this two-factor authentication. It's definitely a pain. You're having to enter in this information every time you log in, but it's a way to protect yourself. It's probably a lot easier to have that extra step, that extra two-factor authentication, rather than going through, if a hacker does steal your information, steal your bank account, having to get that money back or lock down your bank accounts or credit cards, or even worse, they steal your identity. So it's a good idea to try to enable two-factor authentication. So again, a lot of good tips here, things you can do to make sure that you're not falling victim to any IRS scammers or any scammers in general. Make sure that you're trying to follow these tips. And as always, if you have a listener question and you want to have it considered for a future episode, head over to retirewithryan.com and click on Ask a Question, and we'll consider that for a future episode. Have a great week, and I look forward to talking with you next Wednesday. Take care.